I need the first two pages signed and returned to me. Now is it here? Isn't it?
Already.
Oh, you already did. Okay. So it's your idea.
Second rodeo, not the first one.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we just sign the first two and get them back.
Okay.
Okay. Hello.
Recording in progress.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Greg Daniels. I'm with Squire Patton Boggs. I will be helping run the meeting until we have a chair of the board tonight. We can do some introductions here of everyone.
My name's Tony Core. I'm also with Squire Patton Boggs.
Audience members.
I'm Chris Rosman, I was for council for the city.
David Graham, attorney, city of Sunbury. Yeah, I'm Daryl, I see the assistant city administrator.
Are you also an attorney? Yeah. Okay.
Trey Hiller, Metro Development.
Dana Steffen with the city of Sunbury.
Randy Rents. I don't know what to say here. Citizen.
And Ross, citizen.
Skip Lassick, resident Sunbury,
Great.
or Joe's Classic, whatever needs to be said. Yes.
Chair members. Yeah, that's great. All right, so we will call the meeting to order at 5:38. We just did the roll call of trustees. Item 3 on the agenda, certificate of public notice. I went ahead and submitted that for this meeting. Typically, that's the secretary who submits that for every meeting. The main notice that we did is we did have the city post on their website a calendar notice of this meeting. We also published a legal notice in the Delaware Gazette. So we'll talk a little bit more about notices as one of the agenda items. All right, next item on the agenda is background and role of the Sunbury New Community Authority. I know if folks from the city want to talk about this a little bit more.
I can talk about it a little bit. City attorney been involved with Mr. Gill and his group. They are the first members of the Sunbury Community Authority. The main purpose of this authority is to provide a financing mechanism for community improvements out of the interchange area. Mr. Giller and his group is doing a multifamily development, roughly 750 units, but a significant development at the intersection of 36, 37, and bordered on the east by 3B and K, and on the west by Africa, basically in that quadrant. That is part of where the new interchange will take off when you're heading from west to east towards Sunbury, and it goes right through, bifurcates their property. They've been looking to develop that property for some time. It's developer owned, unlike a lot of properties that are in contract and not taken down. So they make a final decision on development, but this one's been developer owned for a significant period of time. They approached Sunbury about bringing the property into Sunbury, annexing it, and entering into a development plan that would include their multifamily that I referenced, and would include participation in a TIF, a tax increment financing district, where the tax revenues are used and directed towards the new interchange, and also an NCA. They committed that their development will provide 10 mils of NCA revenue to community improvements, which they've also allowed that the community improvements can include the interchange and can be directed in accordance with ODOT's phasing plan for the interchange. The initial phase of this interchange does not even touch their property, but they're dedicating the property, they're providing for the interchange, and they're providing significant funding through the TIF and through the NCA to help jumpstart really the interchange that will be similar to the Gemini Parkway to Polaris. As you know, this will be 36, 37 to the new Sunbury Parkway. This will be on the south side. It's thought to be quite a significant improvement. The existing interchange, for those of you who don't know, has been studied by ODOT, and they have determined it is impossible to improve it under its current footprint. To really improve that interchange without this new Sunbury Parkway, they would have to take businesses down. There's just not enough ground out there to do what they would need to do to improve it. And that's why over the past, for those of you that have been around, it's probably been 10 years they've been talking, if not more. They've been talking about this new Sunbury Parkway, whether it's the north or whether it's the south. We're settled on the south side now. And this is actually going to be the impetus towards getting that parkway started. The counties approved the engineering, they paid for the engineering, they're doing the environmental assessment right now in the final phases of that. This thing is going to be moving forward. So appreciate you all for your willingness to serve. Appreciate Mr. Lossick. He actually was on our NCA board that was designed to do the same thing out there that did not go anywhere. So this time I'm excited to have everybody here and be able to actually see something come from the fruits of all your labor. Appreciate you being here tonight. Glad to address any questions that you have individually of the city attorney. I'm not the attorney for this board. The attorneys for the board are here this evening from Squire Patent Laws. I appreciate all of you being here tonight. Chris Bronson has served as bond counsel to Sunbury as long as I've been here. Don Weiser was before Chris. So they have a long history with the village and now city of Sunbury. Appreciate Tony Ford being in here. He was also assistant to the city when it came to our motel tax, which we enacted a few years back. Still waiting on our first motel, but we'll get one better motel tax. And then also appreciate Greg Daniels, who worked with Greg for many years. Met face to face the first time this evening, so appreciate you, Greg. And of course, Bill Hennessy from Patent State. We'll go ahead and answer any questions, but I think it's good that you understand why you're here and what you're doing is significant. And also one other thing I want to say appreciation to Mr. Gilbert. Not only did they agree to do all those things, but they also agreed that Sunbury would be the developer for purposes of this NCA, which means all but Mr. Gilbert you were contacted by the city. So this is a Sunbury NCA. This is not the last property we intend to add to this NCA. We're anticipating other properties will additionally pay their fair share as they develop their interchange area. Unfortunately, we're not in a day and age where public infrastructure improvements to major interchanges come from ODOT or out of the sky from the federal government. They require local communities through these types of tax incentives to provide financing for these improvements, or they just don't happen. And it becomes condition critical that it is not the best out there right now, especially westbound. So, it's really tough with that one lane to get on an interchange and go southbound, which was a lot of our residents do. So appreciate your service, and that's for your introduction.
All right, thanks, Dave. We'll pause here for any questions for Dave, so you can tell he's been living this NCA and this project for a little while.
Not yet.
All right. And maybe just a little bit more background on new community authorities generally. I don't know how many of you are tuned in to the new community authority scene in Delaware County or Central Ohio. There's probably at this point at least 50 of these new community authorities in Central Ohio. I'm hard pressed to think of a community in Central Ohio at this point that is experiencing any level of growth that does not have at least one new community authority. They've proven to be very effective and powerful tools for accomplishing the sort of infrastructure improvements that they've described. So welcome to the new community authority community, I guess. We do hope this will be very effective in getting the interchange going and doing some of the other infrastructure improvements envisioned. That takes care of item number 4 on the agenda. Item number 5, this is a little bit of nuts and bolts of how these authorities work. I'm going to give a very quick overview. If you got questions, that's fine. Stop me and ask me. Don't worry about remembering it all. You'll be prompted. We'll keep going back to some of these terms and some of these concepts throughout this meeting and throughout later meetings. The 5A on trustee appointments. Dave actually did a great introduction on this. As you know, you all were appointed by Sunbury City Council. This is a city-driven new community authority. Some community authorities are a little bit different in that they have some city appointments and some developer appointments. But in this case, it's really city-driven. So all the appointments are going to be channeled through City Council for this authority. Term of office is generally 2 years. At the beginning, there are some staggered 1-year terms. Those will eventually flip over to 2-year terms. And then we already had you go ahead and subscribe your oath of office. So thank you for doing that. You are now all officially trustees. Quorum and voting requirements for authorities. Authorities have the quorum requirements can be a little tricky for authorities. Trustees are broken down in one of 3 classifications. There are citizen members, there's developer members, and then there's a local government representative. The developer members always have to be in the minority for a quorum. So you might have seen us counting heads a little bit with a couple of the absences, and one individual was not able to accept their appointment. We did make sure that the developer members were in the minority, so we do have a quorum. As a 7-member board, we have to have at least 4 members to meet. So that means 3 out of the 4 non-developer members always have to be present in order to have a meeting. Then we can have no developer members, 1 developer member, whatever it takes. On the voting side, that's for quorum. The voting can be constituted however it works out. And abstentions, if you have to abstain for some reason, that does not affect the quorum as long as you're here. So the voting, thankfully, is a little bit easier. We don't have to worry about those sorts of dynamics when we're actually taking votes. In other words, you could have a vote where the developer members, in essence, outvote the citizen members, as long as we have a properly constituted quorum. We probably will not have that many contested votes. Don't worry too much.
City, right? City is the developer in this particular instance. So when you have a voting situation, typically it's the developer who would step out. But when the city is the big developer, how mechanically does that work? Is it assigned? Is it the citizen members that are considered the developer member, or is it the city staff who's considered the developer member, since I'm just a sub-developer?
When City Council made the appointments, they designated citizen, local government, and developer members. So
There's actually one of each tonight. There was 1 citizen member who just couldn't be here.
Yeah.
And then another developer member, that agreed to serve, whose wife is in development, and said I had to consider this.
It's just a little bit, I just want to ask, because it's a little different than the ones I sit on are generally developer driven, except for the city of Columbus.
Yep.
They're a little more similar to this.
Other questions?
Are we free to citizens? I'm for the local government, yes.
I have that here.
So, but I have a question, Skip, Joseph last.
Right.
You're listed as a developer member, not a citizen member.
So we have Ann as a citizen member, Trey as a developer member, Skip as a developer member, Randy as a citizen member, Rick, who is not here tonight, is another citizen member, and then Dana, as you said, you're the local government rep.
Yes.
So we're down, we do have a vacancy. That person would be a developer representative. We've got to find somebody at least, I guess, preferably by the next meeting. But that's fine.
So the missing citizen member is
Rick.
Rick.
Rick,
Okay.
yep.
Okay, thanks.
So we ended up with 5 here, 2 developer members and 3 non-developer members. So we're good from a quorum standpoint. That was a little head counting exercise you might have heard us do before the meeting, just making sure we're all okay and can go ahead. Let's see, open meeting and public records requirements. All our meetings are open public meetings. That won't be a problem. We'll organize all those. We'll advertise all those. You don't have to worry about it being a properly open meeting. We'll follow all the policies we lay out there. Where you may or may not run into some issues is if you guys happen to get together at a party, at a baseball game, whatever, outside. If there's 4 or more of you, then that could be construed as a meeting. But you also have to be talking about authority business. So I know you guys probably want to talk about the authority all the time, but if you're outside of a public meeting and you're all together, try not to. You also can't, as part of the open meetings, any sort of deliberations have to happen in an open meeting as well. So sometimes board members start to discuss things over email. Don't do that. So any sort of deliberations or discussions, they should happen in this forum. If you have questions, especially of the city or legal staff or anything like that, feel free to ask those by email or call us up. That's fine. That's not board deliberations, but as this board is discussing business, just try to do it here. Public records, anything written regarding this authority is technically a public record. We will have a public record policy. What you might want to do, depending on the email address that you use, you might just want to set up a different folder in your email inbox, and anything pertaining to this authority, just put it in that folder. It's not common, but sometimes we do get public records requests. And so I might ask you, Tony might ask you, do you have any records on XYZ topic? If we get a public records request in, if you have everything segregated into a separate email folder, it becomes pretty easy to search. Ethics laws and acknowledgements. You are all public officers. You're subject to Ohio ethics laws. I'd say the 2 big things for a board like this is, number 1, don't steal. You're not going to have many opportunities to do that, but don't. And number 2, if there's an agenda item that in some way personally benefits you, talk to me, talk to Tony before you vote on it. There's a little extra wiggle room for new community authority board members. There are some exceptions to the ethics laws that still might make it okay for you to vote, but I want you to talk to us first before you do that. All right, officers of the authority. We are required to have 4 officers by statute. There is a chair and a vice chair. Those have to be board members. There's a secretary and there's a treasurer. Those two positions can be board members, but they don't have to be. So we're going to go through an officer election process. You guys can start to figure out amongst yourselves who wants to serve which role. But remember, chair, vice chair have to be board members. Secretary and treasurer do not have to be. And typically, I like to split chair and vice chair, one being a citizen or local government representative and the other being a developer member. That just gives enough flexibility to, depending on what we're signing or what action we're taking, we always have an officer that's not conflicted out. On the agenda tonight are bylaws. It's a pretty typical set of bylaws. It's probably used by 2 or 3 dozen authorities at this point. I would recommend at this first meeting adopting bylaws, but as the authority progresses, as the board business progresses, we can always amend them at any meeting if we want to do something a little different. And finally, bonds and insurance. Each of you is required to have a surety bond. We're in the process of obtaining the surety bonds for you. That's something that the authorities typically obtain and pay for. There might be some documents for you to sign. It kind of depends on surety bond agency. By surety bond agency, we'll contact you if there needs to be something signed there. And then insurance, we can discuss whether or not we want to have insurance as a board. I would typically recommend insurance if we're owning any property or entering into any actual contracts to do anything. So typically it's liability insurance. Some authorities do get, the public body equivalent of E&O insurance, but we're not going to have any employees. And for the most part, E&O insurance for public bodies like this doesn't really pay for anything. So, we can evaluate that as we go forward here.
So my 2 cents is we want insurance.
Yeah, I mean,
Whatever the vote comes up, we're voting for, at least I'm voting for insurance, or I'm gonna.
I don't disagree with you, but what type of liability situations have occurred? I mean, just 1 or 2 off the top of your head that you can think of.
You see it more with authorities that would be entering into construction contracts. So if someone gets hurt on the job, typically that's taken care of by the workers' comp insurance for the contractor. But if you have some sort of umbrella coverage for the authority, that could step in as well if the workers' comp isn't sufficient enough,
Right.
Or if there's not a worker that gets injured, wandering onto a construction site. The other place we see it is more and more community authorities are owning green space and parks, and I would definitely recommend having at least the liability insurance component if the authorities own any property.
Now, is that anticipated in this NCA to have green spaces and whatever that are the NCA or the developer?
Well, so just for my 2 cents worth, right, just being on these, very flexible. It's really whatever eventually the board is brought in front of the board.
Right.
The city obviously has a huge decision determining making factor in what comes and doesn't come, simply because they're driving, the boat from that perspective. Right. But there's a lot of flexibility. The board and an NCA can do a lot of things once the revenue starts coming in, because it is correct that it's set up specifically, as we've heard and we discussed, for the interchange and for the growth of that.
Right.
But there can be a lot of different things that come along through the NCA process that maybe city may think it's a great idea to have a pocket park right outside, and this authority could, there's all kind of different ways you can use it. And I think that was really one of the reasons that we gave up the developer rights to the city, because in my mind, letting the authority grow to an appropriate size is a smart thing to do for the city. That way they seat one board. That way they have one set of processes to go through for the authority, versus having the metro authority and then the other authority and then the other authority. So you really can, there's a lot of flexibility in having the city step forward and take the developer position. So I think from our perspective, as board members, me being on several different ones that our perspective is, we want the insurance to cover ourselves, because there could be a time where someone comes in front of us and says, hey, we want the authority to build this whatever, and we're gonna pay for it in another way. And I mean, there's very flexible things that the authority can actually do if the city chooses to use it with that flexibility going forward. I may take a job, no, I'm not an attorney, but.
No, I think that's, I think it's a great summary. Yeah. As we start to own property, and enter into contracts that are doing something, I definitely recommend some level of at least liability insurance. We do have statutory immunity, but it is helpful to have the insurance if for no other reason to pay for the legal defense. I don't know if there's any concrete plans at this point for the community authority to enter into those sorts of contracts, or own property.
At this point, we haven't had one developer, single family residential developer out in that area that has brought forward this concept of the authority owning the green space. We're in discussions about that. Again, we want everybody out there to pay their fair share. And that's going to involve you there. This is the first time we've been asked to do something like that. Sunbury has had one new community authority in its history, and that is for any of you that live in or are familiar with Sunbury Meadows. It's on either side of 3 driving south. There is a community authority there that assesses 4 mills to every residential home. I believe it's 20 years from 30. Will you pay it for?
The term is for 30 years, I know that.
Okay. But that goes to the schools.
Right.
So, and that's being passed on. This is the first one that really has been city driven. That was a big development. We said, make the schools happy. If they want a school, whatever you need, you're building a lot of houses, make the schools happy. Bring your kids here. And schools came back and said, we really don't want it. We don't need the spot, but we can use them. And so that is it. This is the first one really that's strictly Sunbury control driven. And again, as Trey stated, a lot going on there. My recommendation would be have all the insurance. You guys are out there being volunteers. If something happens, you can call the insurance agent. That's it. They deal with that. You're great.
Now, is the 10 mills that I saw mentioned in here, does that go straight to the NCA? Or is that divvied up like it was the last time, where the NCA got like 4, the village got 3, the schools got 4, or something like that, or 2? I can't remember how it was divided.
Greg can speak to this more eloquently than I am.
Okay.
But Skip, you're right. The last NCA was very complicated. This one is not complicated. Okay. Right now, generally speaking, it's 10 mills. It goes from community improvements. There's no divvying it up. And the community improvements are defined as. Could be a lot of things out there. There's a whole laundry list to catch all. But the primary focus is this.
And the money always comes straight to the community authority, and then the board would divvy it up at that point. And while it's one property, it will probably, I don't know, Trey, if you prefer to be billed directly or have it go through the county on a tax bill.
Yeah, that would just, I mean, it's more, the best way we found to do it, on being on both sides, is just have the tax, have the county bill it. That way it's just taken care of. We'll assess it at our September meeting, right? August meeting, whatever, I always forget the date, but whenever that is, we'll assess the value. It won't be any value this year or next year because there's no vertical construction. It'll start this year, but there won't be anything CO'd until mid next year. So we'll start I think we're going to start in July, I think is what our plan is. Assuming we get the engineering back, which we're working on, but we're right in that. So we won't assess any value. So we'll have probably, I try to speak on both sides. So we'll get assessed very minimal because there's nothing there. This board won't get any revenue probably from our project for 3 years, probably. So you have 3 years of expenses that'll have to be dealt with, you know, on the build up. And I assume the city's going to front the expenses and then get paid back, you know, however that works from a city accounting process. And then we'll start sending money back to the city, right, for their proportion of the authority, or the interchange of whomever's building it, so that'll kind of be our contribution. But I do think, again, if the city has a tremendous opportunity to use it with a lot of flexibility if they wish to, right? I mean, it's a mechanism, it's a political subdivision, it's now up and running as taxing authority, technically speaking. So now that's what the millage is basically a tax on your property, special assessment, I understand it, but it functionally works the same way. And then I think there's a bifurcation of 10 mils and 15 mils. So ours is 10, and then others, and the standard is 15. And then there's, you know, if they want to come in and negotiate something different, the builder can do that through the city, of course, and that'll be their choice to do it or not do it. And then we'll eventually vote on it one way or the other. Is the way it would work out.
So much more to come.
Yeah.
That's for later meetings, but yeah, that is a good rundown of the sort of things we'll eventually be talking about at future board meetings. All right, I think we have covered the overview. Any other questions from folks? If you think of questions, feel free to raise them later. All right, question.
I didn't notice anything in here about the frequency of board meetings. Do we set that frequency as a board, or is there?
You can, or you can do it ad hoc. There's an agenda item towards the end that we typically have called next meeting. Sometimes, depending on the board, we can also set the meeting schedule rather than just a next meeting. Sometimes boards get to the next meeting agenda item and they say, hey, just call us or email us to set up a meeting when there's business items to do again.
And then we only have to have one a year, technically.
Yep.
After this one, we have to have one more. Then going forward, we have to have one a year if there's no new business coming in, which I don't think that'll be the case. Let's just say for a second that there's no new business coming in. We'll have to meet once a year to set our values for the tax rules. So.
And Trey, you said that you probably won't have anything this year. It's gonna
Vertical will start construction. We won't have anything
Okay.
vertical until mid to late 24 December,
Okay.
based on construction cycle.
So we might not even need to meet again this year because there won't be any values to set or collect.
Yeah, it's for sure be zero this year for us. We just
Yeah.
want everything physically finished.
There might be some other agenda items that are done in connection with the city. There's probably going to be some level of cooperative agreements at some point between this board and the city. We might deal with that this year. But you know, at this point, there's going to be a little bit of a ramping up period where there's not a lot happening, but then hopefully more and more starts to happen. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Great. Next item on the agenda is reports and communications. A lot of times we'll have a developer report or a city report. I think we've kind of covered both of those bases so far. But that's just to give the board an idea of what's going on. As we start to have money, we'll typically layer in a treasurer's report that will go over the financials. These sorts of boards tend to get audited once every 2 years. So sometimes there's an audit update that happens in this section, and then anything else that happens to be topical. We will typically include at this point in the meeting a public comment agenda item. As I think you can probably tell, it's somewhat rare to have public show up at these meetings, but as we get more projects, and especially if we have single family residences, we do tend to have more people show up at these. So we'll see how it goes. But for the most part, we want to have that on the agenda. We'll have it on the agenda for meetings, but there's usually not any public. Next item on the agenda is introduction of new motions or resolutions. The first 4 items are going to be officer elections. We'll take them in the order of chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. Again, chair and vice chair have to be board members. Secretary, treasurer do not have to be board members. We'll have, we need a motion to nominate for each officer position. We need a second. I'll ask if there's any other nominations at that point. I will say I'm still waiting for my first contested NCA officer election. So, but maybe tonight's the night. And then if there's no other nominations, then we'll go on to a vote on the motion. The way votes typically work is it's typically a voice vote, but any one of you can ask for a roll call vote. So, all right. Any questions on officer elections before we dive in?
Who would do the secretary and treasurer role if we didn't?
Say probably one of us would be the secretary. Treasurer, sometimes you have city staff fill treasurer positions. I would think. What?
Probably Dan.
I think we anticipate that.
That was what I was told is. Okay, wants to nominate me for treasurer.
You got voluntold for it? Yeah.
Is that your role in the city?
Yes, I'm the finance director.
Okay.
That's right. With PAL uses their internal people and they have an outside accounting company on a couple of different SOPs. So I think it's actually much better if we just have to stick with the city, do those two roles.
Yeah. But if anyone wants to be a treasurer, good news is, doesn't sound like we're going to have any money for the next couple of years. There's not a lot to do.
That's bad.
It's not bad.
That's the bad news.
It's the good news for the treasurer. It's the bad news for the board.
Are we allowed to just have a discussion about these roles?
Absolutely.
So I noticed the secretary role is very, well, I mean, now that understanding there's only about one meeting a year, the secretary role is probably the most involved with taking the meeting minutes and everything, so. That's just something to consider. Wanting to be-
Out of all the, yes, that's correct. Out of all the officer positions, at least for this part. Once we get to have money, the treasurer position then becomes the most involved. And depending on what all is going on, sometimes you have your chair being more involved than the secretary. It just kind of depends how things go. But I would think it's probably fair to say at this point, none of these are going to be all that burdensome for the first year or two.
You don't want to go to role?
Does anybody want to be a chair or vice chair?
I don't care one way or the other, so it's fine. I'll do whatever. I am that for most of them.
Because you two are the development members. And we're the only two citizen members.
Yeah.
So is it better to have a developer member or is
They're saying one of each, one developer.
right, one, yeah.
I think one of each for this authority is fine, and I don't see it being an issue either way. I think it'd be fine if the developer is the chair or vice versa.
That's fine. I'm, I can defer to you. That's no problem.
And that's why I'll be more happy to do
I
it.
mean, you're kind of more knowledgeable about all this than we are right now, so it might be more advantageous. I throw that out to you guys.
I agree.
Wants to be the chair. Or just a meeting.
Well, we'd have to, you want me to, okay, you want me to, well, can I, being on the,
You can make a motion to nominate Mr. Giller if you like
I'll
for chair.
nominate Mr. Diller as chairman.
I'll second.
So that's. Any other nominations? Everyone's looking away, so I'm going to conclude no.
It's their turn.
So we have a motion to elect Trey as chairperson of the board. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations. You want to take over the meeting as chair, or do you want me to continue?
You can continue. They're the treasurer.
Next item is election of vice chairperson. Do we have any nominations for vice chair? This is the easy one. Vice chair doesn't really do anything.
I nominate. Randy Renz, vice chair.
I'll second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions. All right, congratulations, Randy. Next item is Secretary of the Board of Trustees. Again, this can be a board member. If it is a board member, we'll help you with minutes and record keeping. But it does not have to be a board member. So any thoughts or discussion on secretary?
I don't.
That's not thought or discussion. That's a good old fashioned statement there.
Yes.
So can we nominate someone that's not present and assign them the position? Or
It doesn't need to be a board member. Do we have somebody with the city that we could fill in that role?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly have the city clerk serve as the secretary. I mean, she'll be helping us in terms of posting the agenda and stuff. She may not quite understand the content, the minutes may be a little bit of a challenge, so that is a caveat.
If you utilize that resource, we need to pay that resource through the NCAA.
Yeah, we would not have to pay that, because that's a city.
And we can certainly prepare draft minutes and
I think really that's, I mean, 3-4 years down the road when things get, rolling and adding things to it. Maybe that's a change, or maybe it's exactly, we have one of our administration people does it for the other authorities. She's not a board member, she's just an administration person. So for me, that does it. So I think it's, maybe when we get rolling, maybe it'd be more important to have a board member as a secretary. But right now, I think it's more just kind of not a placeholder in a negative way, just kind of a placeholder in a way until we have more activity.
Yeah, the other thing is, if you just want your attorney to do it, they volunteered that they would do it, which they know the content, they're gonna be taking the information down, they're gonna be able to prepare the minutes fairly easily. Until, like Jerry said, until it gets up and rolling, there's not a lot.
No.
Is that 2-year time limit that we would have for that person in that role?
it's not limited. And we do officer elections every year. So the 2 years is the term for the trustees.
We could have
But we'll do,
discussion.
first meeting of every year, we do officer elections, and if someone leaves or resigns, we'll fill the position.
To the extent you want an attorney to do it, I think Brandon's here tonight, and he's available and will be available for the NCAA as needed. But I think it's gonna be Tony Forms actually will be attending and standing the meetings from here on out. So to the extent you want an attorney, your motion should be probably for him.
I think that's a reasonable way to go.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, are you making the motion?
Yeah, I mean, I can. What am for the secretary?
Secretary.
I make a motion to select Squire Boggs as the secretary, because I'm not sure which attorney it'll be.
It'll be Tony. So,
Oh, okay, so,
yeah.
okay.
Yep.
I'll second.
Okay. Any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations.
Taking notes right now.
There we go. All right, and finally, treasurer of the board. I think we already have a volunteer. Do we have a motion for our volunteer?
Motion to nominate Nina Sutton and Stefan over treasurer.
Second.
Other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Next item on the agenda is resolution number 2020. This should be 2023-1. Adopting the bylaws of the Board of Trustees of the Authority. Again, these bylaws are in your packet. They're pretty straightforward, pretty common. Again, I'd recommend adopting some bylaws, and to the extent you want to make adjustments later, we'll make adjustments at a future meeting.
Yeah, I review them. I think they're fine, so I'd make a motion to approve the bylaws as presented in the board package.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, we have a motion to approve in a second. All in favor?
I,
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Resolution 2023-2, adopting the public records policy of the authority. And we're a public body. We need to have a public records policy. We have a pretty standard public records policy included in your packet. Just like the bylaws, we can change this at any meeting, update, change your policies. We also included a very rudimentary records retention schedule within the public records policy. For the most part, we're going to keep everything. Emails expire after a couple of years. If there's like voicemails or anything like that, we can get rid of that sooner. But this is not a records intensive organization. We pretty much keep everything forever.
And who's housing that data?
Your secretary. And as we talked about, to the extent you have like correspondence, which will largely be email, just try to organize it if you ever have a records request.
is the records custodian, which is mentioned in several sections within the public records request, is that also fall to the secretary, or is that a specific?
It is. It falls to the secretary, and the resolution itself, we designate the secretary as the public records custodian. And just like anything else organizationally, we can change that later if we want, but usually just makes more sense for it to be the secretary.
Also, another smart thing to get into, if we have to do any communication, copy our attorney on the email, right? That helps with record retention. It also helps with attorney-client privilege. If we have questions, it's always nice to, that way you're covering. It's good practice in most of these boards, but it's something that nobody thinks about. Just copy it. They may not even respond. A lot of times they don't. A lot of times it's just, they have it, they have the information. If they feel like they need to, they do. If not, and they just let it go.
It's a good suggestion. Help us keep track of everything.
I look through the record retention policy and I think it's fine. And so I would make a motion to approve as presented in the meeting materials.
Now, second.
Any other discussion or questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Next item on the agenda is resolution 2023-3, establishing the designated posting locations for our meeting notices. What we have suggested in this resolution, and again, just like the bylaws, the public records policy, we can change this at any meeting, but we would post it here. We would send a notice to the Delaware Gazette newsroom. We would also publish a legal notice with the Delaware Gazette. And then just let the city know that we're having a meeting as well, so they can put it on their website. We can ask them to do that. As we get more projects built, there might be a community room or something in your development. Maybe we post it there. Maybe there's message boards for single family developments. We might distribute it by email. That sort of stuff are examples of things that get added later on as these authorities progress. Okay. Any meeting, we can amend the notice policy for the next future meetings.
I'll make a motion that we accept resolution 2023-3.
That's a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Questions? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And finally, we have resolution number 2023-4, accepting the declaration and levying the community development charge on property within the new community district of the authority. At this point, it's Trey's company's property. As he described, that provides for a 10 mil charge on that property, probably starting, he said, a couple years from now. Next election is probably 2025.
Yeah, we'll have 700, it's 750-ish, I can't remember off the top of my head, 40 or 50 multifamily units on the west side of 71. As they describe it, where Parkway West leg is gonna bifurcate the property. So start construction again, probably July, August sometime this year, and then have vertical construction finished probably July, August of 2024. So probably hit the rolls 2024. I couldn't recall, I don't remember exactly what we agreed to, I think it was COs, but that's just off the top of my head, I think that's what we decided.
I think it's COs as well, and that's pretty common for authorities. Most authorities don't levy or collect charges until there's something built on a piece of property. So in this case, it's pretty typical. You have a CO in 1 year, you start to get the income from those buildings with the C of O the next year. So probably what will happen if you get them complete in 2024, we get them on the tax bills. The first money is going to hit our bank accounts in 2025.
When you say CO, are you talking certificate of occupancy?
Yes, correct.
Just one quick comment, as city attorney, I received an email this afternoon. There's a local resident who forwarded this package. He is NCA interested, I guess is the best way to put it. He serves on the board for the Sunbury Community Authority, NCA, which is the formal school board NCA we discussed earlier. There is a typo in Article 4.2, which will be corrected in the final version. There's a reference to cost and identified under section 5.9. That should actually be 5.8. You found that? Do it with them, do it right, and we'll fix it. So we'll give you those things and bring that, I will include that.
So let's say we only have what, 6 attorneys review? Let's see, I know, I can put around the room to how many we had to review that, somebody did it, and I've got 2 that aren't here, so.
Good catch.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve accepting the declaration and levying the community development charge on property within the new community district of the authority.
Second it.
All right. Any discussion or questions on the motion?
I do have a question. In the first paragraph of the resolution, why does the petition have to be filed with the clerk of the Columbus City Council?
Oh, that is a typo, which we'll fix in the final record.
Okay. It would be Sunbury, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Discussion items? Okay, I notice people studying intently. All good? Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, that concludes our scheduled business. Once we get through scheduled business, we'll have an other business item on the agenda. That's when any board member can bring up any other business you want the board to address or discuss.
One thing that came to my mind that we may want to consider is when we're adding additional properties. There's 2 sides of it, right? There's the developer side who's going to do the documents and bring them to us. There's also our side who's going to review the documents and put them together to bring a proposal together. We don't have this now, and all those fees are for the developer would be for authority purpose, therefore they can get repaid or the city gets repaid however the millage is gonna go. That we push some of those costs off on the individual developers coming in. So we don't have a huge, if you have a lot of properties early in these authorities, you get behind the 8 ball really quickly, just simply because you're bringing revenue, you're bringing future business into the authority. But future business is future business, but you gotta pay for the legal to get done today. And the legal cost about the same to do, no matter if it's a house or 1,000 units, the cost about the same to do the legal. The steps are pretty much the same. So we might want to consider in the future when we have people coming in or potential options that we push some of that cost from our side over to the developer who's coming through. That way we're not stacking up some additional costs that eventually it's going to be paid back anyway. Might as well take care of it up front. It's one thing from the lower side authority we found for 10 years in and just started to pay back the expenses in that authority simply because you added so many properties so quickly and it takes 5 years to get them up and built and generate revenue. So just one thing we might want to consider when we get to where we've got projects coming in.
The developers will need to know that upfront though, before they want to do business with us, right? That they will be assessed that fee to pay for our legal costs.
I mean, it could. I mean, you can. It's just depends. It's all financeable, right? It's all financed. And again, I'm thinking of the developer puts a sewer line in. The developer in this county and the authority agree that that's okay, and then they're going to get some of that millage back to offset their cost of that development. In this case, they're specifically using it for the interchange, but the inner process is the same process. Whether you're using it for the interchange, you're using it for sewer on the site to bring a property into the authority, it costs the same amount of money. So there's no, but those are all fees that are financeable from the developer's perspective. So if we want to push some of that off to the developer and say, hey, these are, you can finance them, but you've got to pay for them up front. And if you're going to get some of your money back over time or however you're going to work it out. So it just doesn't put us in the hole in the first couple of years. I mean, it's just, one way or the other, it's going to happen. It's just whether we're going to be in the hole quicker or it's going to come back a little less to the city in a quicker way. To me, it seems more practical. We'll try to keep everybody on flat footed. I assume you see this in other authorities where, you know, these guys aren't sitting here for free. Right. We all know that it's fine, right? We need them, but we've got to pay for them. And if you can push some of that cost out and then get some of it, you know, the city doesn't have to fund this authority so much up front. Might be a nice way to do it.
And the city, of course, is going to be having conversations with all these developers. Maybe that's something we can talk to the city folks about as part of the process, as they're saying, hey, you know, you're coming into our community, you need to join this authority. Here's what that means for you.
So would they be the one to initiate that conversation? Or would they come to us and we would initiate that conversation?
No, generally the way it would happen, I mean, it depends. When I'm the developer, I'm out physically looking for opportunities to build.
Right.
That's what I do. So I'm out looking. In this particular situation, that Sunbury has an issue and an area that they want to develop, which is the interchange. They have a direction that they want to go. Well, they're not sitting back actively, I'm sure, but looking for people who are going to want to develop in that area to then pay the fee and then to commit. Eventually, we'll get all the documentation to have to agree, right, to add in.
Right.
Most of that legwork's probably already done with the city before they would show up to us.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I would, again, and the other ones, I'm the developer and I try to keep everybody on a rolling update. Hey, this is happening. These things could be coming forward. So, you know, so you don't get 50 pages handed to you at a meeting and say, here, vote for this.
Right. When
you didn't know what it was. You know, practically speaking, it's just more comfortable for all of us if we kind of know. But, you know, it's almost the cake's baked by the time it gets to us almost. You know what I mean? Because the city's already agreed and they have, you know, citizen members and they have the developer members and, you know, so it's kind of, you know, we're not perfunctory by any nature, but it kind of is at the end. We just have to make sure we're doing everything we're supposed to do right. That's why I say get the insurance.
Yeah.
I'm good to go with that.
Any other items?
At what point do we get insurance? Do we do that now?
What I'm gonna do after this meeting is talk to the city. It might be possible to put us on their policy for little or no expense. If that's not possible, at our next meeting, we can have an item for insurance. Again, we're not entering in any contracts. We're not owning any property. There's really no way for us to be liable until we do that. But we'll have that discussion with the city and just, with some of these, especially city-driven authorities, it's pretty easy just for them to throw us on as an additional insured. Okay. Any other items? Hearing none, next meeting. This is really kind of where we get into board preference to some extent. We can set a meeting schedule. We can do it ad hoc, next time there's a development. Next year, this time we can have a meeting. It's really the tempo of meetings is up to the board.
We're gonna hit one September. There's nothing, it'll be quick, and then we just stay on that September
Definitely do that. Yeah.
on a yearly basis going forward, and then they'll tell us if we need like a special one because something's coming through that we need to agree to. And I could do that. That way you just have one more this year, and then you're statutorily you have to have one a year. And the time that you have to have it to do your charge revenues is in that September timeframe.
By then, it can be any point in time during the year leading up to September, but we want to have one before September because there are some things for charge certifications that we just want to make sure is all.
Especially if we start getting houses. If we ever get houses, we want to be at that September as close as you can to the tax lien date, so you're picking up full value of the properties.
So this September, its significance is that you'll be up more and running, or what's the significance of this?
Probably just to get us on a September track,
Okay,
because you're gonna have one, I mean, it's almost like this could have happened in September. The only reason this didn't happen in September, because I need the information, I needed this form and I needed the documents for financing when I go for the construction loan.
Right.
We could have waited, but I can't, I mean, I could have waited, but it's not in anyone's best interest.
Right.
Yes, it is. That was not everybody's best interest for me to wait. So I want to get going as fast as possible. Market condition, everything,
Right.
But you don't wait in real estate, you do as fast as you can, because you never know what's gonna happen. So, but we could go September, we'll just do that.
Yeah.
Just make schedule one.
Gonna pick a date and time now, or you wanna?
Doesn't matter, beginning month, end of the month, as far as assessment.
I'm required to be here by any means, but I usually do try to attend just the economy between the city of Long Barrel to the board, and I'm out the last week of September.
Yeah, just wanna try the 18th to the 22nd, like 18th, 19th or 20th.
20th is a council meeting, so we won't avoid that night, but the 18th and 19th.
Yeah, I could do 5:30 still.
I might even recommend the 18th every other Tuesday, which I don't know how that falls. There's mayor's court in this building. They're here in second floor. I think we should avoid that night.
Yeah.
So you want to go the 18th?
The 18th is the board saying it's standing meeting, so they would be us.
So 19th, we know if that is a.
There's a court night there. I never knew that.
So
Even if it is a mayor's court night,
they're not up here anymore anywhere.
they're on the second floor, but
Completely.
yes,
So we have this.
yes, should be fine.
So
September 19th.
5:30.
Tuesday, September 19th, 5:30.
Yeah. All right. Yep, we'll work with city staff and make sure everything gets scheduled and calendar invites go out. All right, That brings us to the last item on the agenda, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Congrats on your first meeting.
Thank you.